80 episodes. We waited 80 episodes for Gohan to finally have a full-on serious moment in Dragon Ball Super, and it finally happened, people. Now, I know a lot of people were coming into this video expecting that if Gohan lost, that I was gonna just be fanboy raging. While I always do include a portion of my fandom into my reviews, just because I think it's important for me to express exactly how I'm feeling, regardless of what, I was grading this episode and giving my review and my perspective on this episode mainly from an objective standpoint, because that's how I do things. Regardless if I would have been absolutely distraught if Gohan lost this fight, I was going to come in here regardless and grade the episode based on the merits of the episode, what was better for the story, and regardless of how much I was championing Gohan because I'm a fan of the character and I wanted to see him succeed and have his great moment, ultimately, I was coming in here regardless to say whether the episode was awesome, whether, whatever the case may be, if it was bad, whatever it was. So let's get that misconception out of here to begin with, because again, I was coming in here to be just 100% honest, regardless of how I felt. Now, with that being said, what they did with the outcome of this fight between Gohan and Lavenda was, I think personally, the best thing for the fandom and also for the story. Now, what I mean by that is the fandom been wanting Gohan to do some epic shit, and if they would have come in and have Gohan just immediately get bodied, destroyed, like nasty, just like the point where, really, you did that to Gohan? A lot of people would have been mad. So what they did was, I think maybe you could argue that they played it safe by making it a draw. But nevertheless, while it does help the fandom to not be completely destroyed, a portion of the fandom, because there was a lot of people that accepted Gohan can take this L, it's fine, whatever. But for the most part, I think it also helped as well to show that Gohan still needs to train, because while he did do some work, he put in some work, ultimately it shows that he still has a ways to go. And let's be honest, if it wasn't for the poison, I think Gohan would have pretty much handled this very nicely, because it was mainly the poison that distracted Gohan throughout the fight, between getting blasted in the eyes with the poison and then it kind of taking over his whole body as he powered up more with Super Saiyan. That's really what was kind of detrimental to his capability in this fight. It was the poison. It wasn't really anything else, because Lavenda didn't look like he was too much. It was kind of his quirk, which I guess still ultimately in combat, that's a part of Lavenda. That's not just like that somebody from the crowd was spraying. So you got to take that into account, because again, now with Dragon Ball Super, they're kind of going a little bit more with different things instead of like what I was talking about in previous video of who has the bigger muscle or who can do the bigger blast. They're trying to have like, what's going on in modern shonen with like different powers and different quirks and things of that nature. So it still is accounted for regardless of whether you feel that it's cheating or not regarding him using the poison, because it's something that he does. So you factor that in there. But I just gotta say a couple different things. For starters, Goku's character was kind of humorous throughout this episode. I almost felt as though he was like some hood father and this was a street brawl and some shit, and he's like, yo, my boy better learn how to throw them hands. I don't care if he's getting his ass whipped, because throughout the fight he's like, yeah, it's looking great, and like his son is getting kicked around and shit like that. I'm like, yo, Goku, who the fuck? A lot of people, I'm sure, would think of the same thing. Like, Goku's just there all cheery and shit. Like, your son is taking a bit of an ass whipping throughout this fight. What are you smiling about right now? So ultimately, that was also, I guess, a lot of the pride that he had. And I think that even goes back to certain elements in Dragon Ball Z, like with the whole Cell thing. One of the big things is he wanted to see his son do some work. He wanted to see his son improve and showcase that power that he always knew Gohan had, because Goku always knew it. We always knew it from the moment that he busted out with a power level of 700 and something and attacked Raditz and shit like that. We always knew Gohan had that in him. So I think part of what he was doing in this one was mainly going back to that one thing that he always wanted from his son, and that's to showcase that he can kick some ass, and maybe one day when Goku finally can't do it anymore, his son can take up the mantle, even though he's, pretty much a book nerd at this point. So I think that was mainly where Goku's perspective was coming from within this episode, as he's smiling there while Gohan is getting bodied. Another thing I want to talk about real quick is some of the music cues, because even though obviously this is all Japanese stuff, this is nothing to do with old English composers or whatever. But I did notice a couple of tracks, and I was kind of curious if anybody else noticed as well. Especially in particular, there was like scenes where I think it was when Lavender was like jumping in the air. It almost felt like a little bit Faulkner-esque, like some of the old Dragon Ball Z OSTs that we had, the English broadcast stuff that they did with Bruce Faulkner and stuff like that. It did kind of give me a little bit of a vibe of that nature, and I was kind of glad about that, because even though, a lot of the Japanese purists, they shit all over the Faulkner score, there are some pretty dope stuff in there, and I definitely was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. And I'm not saying that Bruce Faulkner is coming back or any shit like that. All I'm saying is one of the cues definitely reminded me of some nice Bruce Faulkner stuff that I personally enjoyed, so it was kind of nostalgic in that perspective. And honestly, the fight as a whole, it wasn't good as, or it wasn't as good, shall I say, because it was a dope fight overall, but it wasn't as good as I felt maybe the Majin Buu versus Bazil. I think the Majin Buu versus Bazil, because Satan getting hurt and Majin Buu just completely letting loose, I think maybe that fight was a bit more on the epic side, but he still had a pretty dope fight. And also, something that I wanted to point out as well, did anybody else feel them Piccolo vibes? Like, hold on. Shout outs to Piccolo being what a lot of people consider Gohan's true father, because when Gohan was actually using strategy, he wasn't just like, fuck it, I'm gonna pull a Vegeta when he gets mad, just start blasting all over the place. He was actually using strategy, using his own ki as kind of like, okay, I can kind of sense he just hit me and my ki is right here. So that was straight up a Piccolo move if I've ever seen one, and that showcases that some of that training that he does with Piccolo, while yeah, Piccolo is far weaker than Gohan, he's been outclassed many years ago, whatever, ultimately it showcases that Piccolo's trainings still brought forth something great, and that's that Gohan is somewhat of a strategist. So that definitely was a great scene as well, when Gohan is just trying to, figure things out. So I was like, yo, hype shit right there. But ultimately, I just gotta say that this episode, this fucking episode, honestly, I'm really happy from both a critical standpoint and from a fan standpoint, because from a critical standpoint, yeah, in a way, Gohan shouldn't have had a triumphant victory, because if he did, then, what's the point of all this workup, especially for the main tournament? If he would have just completely come in there, body Lavender like he was nothing, then it also wouldn't have been an interesting fight, am I right? So you definitely needed the struggle side, and the fact that he didn't completely take the L, again, I feel as though that was Toei being in touch with the fandom, because I definitely think that they have their pulse on the fandom for the most part of what the fandom wants, but at the same time, they were teetering on the line of like, well, we also have to make something interesting and do good for the story, right? You don't want a crappy story. So ultimately, it also helped to progress the fact that Gohan still has a ways to go. I mean, even in the end, when Goku was down there, he's apologizing to him. He's like, I'm sorry or whatever. And at the very least, Goku did a fatherly act where he was like, yeah, don't worry. That was an exciting fight. I really enjoyed it, which in retrospect, maybe that's not the words that he should have used, but nevertheless, it was a proud father that he's like, yo, you did work. I'm proud of you right now. So that was a good scene. And honestly, before we talk about the little bit of the ending, which is kind of vague, but nevertheless, there was some more stuff with the Omni King and the Grand Priest or whatever, which in retrospect, I gotta ask one big question for the fans, because first of all, I want to know, when I went into this, honestly, after watching this episode, not only did I have my opinion, I'm very, very curious about the fandom as a whole's opinion. How did you feel about that finale? How did you feel about the ultimate conclusion of this, that it was a draw? Or were you disappointed? You really wanted Gohan to win? Or were you disappointed you really wanted him to take a hard L? I mean, it was on some seismic toss shit, what he did to Lavender. And again, that all went into strategy. It's like, okay, the best thing to do, since I can't see him, I can't feel him, is when I do get a hold of him, I just gotta mash this motherfucker into the ground. I gotta do something that completely finishes this fight one way or another. But also, do you feel as though, once again, because we've already seen a little bit of dodgy stuff from the Grand Priest, do you feel as though it was potentially a little bit on the cheating side that Gohan didn't get the win? And the reason I bring that up is because at the end of the day, Lavender was incapacitated. He passed the fuck out already. Gohan was on his feet and he said, I won. And then Gohan fell down, and all of a sudden it's a draw. Do you think as though it's on some dark tournament Yu Yu Hakusho shit going on right now, where he got cheated out of completely getting the victory? I mean, again, I'm not mad, honestly. I'm more than satisfied, because again, it serves both purposes for the plot, but also for us to say at least Gohan didn't completely get savagely, brutally destroyed, right? So it's a good thing in that aspect, but it do kind of, it looks a little bit like, I mean, they could have fucking pulled one of those moves from like the old Dragon Ball tournaments where it's like, you gotta stand up on your feet for 5 seconds and say, I am the world champion, something like that. They could have done that, but I mean, technically Gohan was on his feet and he said, I won, while Lavender was out cold. So in my perspective, honestly, he should have gotten the win in that regard. Again, I'm not upset because I don't want people to think, oh, this is the fanboy talking. It's like, it does come across as that way. Then the ending, which again, it was a little bit vague. We didn't have full-on details regarding it, but basically, in a nutshell, whoever loses, their universe is getting wiped out, and it seems as though potentially the angels, like Whis and Vados and those people, already knew about a lot of this, and there was more detail, which again, maybe in a future video, I'll talk more about that, because I was mainly just like focusing in on the Gohan fight anyway, but I'm kind of curious why Whis would withhold that information. Is it just that he's so loyal to the Grand Priest and all of them, or what's up with that? That kind of had me curious. And I mean, as a whole, the episode, very fucking awesome, very satisfying, I think, for all sections of the fandom. The fact that it wasn't a complete loss for Gohan, but it also wasn't a complete win, so it showcases he has a road to go to get back to what he used to be. Although technically, I still say without the poison, Lavenda ain't have shit. So big question. I'm kind of curious overall what you guys thought about this episode, because that's really what I left from this episode thinking, like, oh my god, I'm kind of curious what my subscribers and my viewers think about this whole fight to begin with. So what is your opinion on it? Do you think that they cheated Gohan out of the victory in the end? How do you feel about it being a draw? And are you looking forward to Goku versus Bergamo? Because that's the next fight we have coming up in the next episode. And as a whole, if I want to give it a score, honestly, I want to say it was in the 8. It was 8.5. Again, it wasn't as good as Majin Buu's fight, because that was really fucking awesome, and I gave that like about 9.5. I'd say it was about 8.5 to a 9. It served the plot, also served the fans, and all around, yeah, satisfying. I had a great time with it. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and stalk my Facebook to get more when the video ends. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day.